Hello, everybody. This is Coach Chris Larari, and today I'm going to cover my physical preparation philosophy. Here's where we're going to start. This is based off of Fergus Connolly's four coactive model and how it's based around health. Now, for me, I went ahead and just mixed it into my skyscraper, and then I put health at the bottom because health is the foundation. Without health, none of the other stuff matters. Okay, so if we look at function or just that foundation, then health is going to go first, but then psychology is what matters the most from there. What's our mindset? What's our mindset towards life? What's our mindset towards, performance? What's our mindset towards business? Well, whatever it is that you're trying to have a mindset towards, what is that mindset? After that, then I go into the physical, and that's where this entire presentation comes into play. We can look at the physical body, or we can look at the biomotors of that physical body. Okay, if we look at biomotors, that's stuff like speed, strength, flexibility, stuff like that. And then the physical body obviously is, how tall you are, what's your weight like, things of that nature. From there, then we move on into dialing in more specific skills or the technical, and then we move on into the tactical or the strategy behind all this stuff, or just schemes, right? If we're looking at playing any sport that you want to, right? The specific skills for that sport as well as the strategy for that sport. Now, I built this in a going up like this because yes, the technical specific skills really do matter, especially as you climb ranks, right? It's more about specific skills at the pro level. Everybody already has the physical body, right? For the most part, anyways. Everybody already has the right mindset. Everybody is already healthy for the most part. Again, we're trying to do our best to keep that health as we go forward. So the specific skills really need to start getting dialed in and take more of take more of the forefront. Same thing with the strategy, because if you don't know the game that you're playing, then that's not gonna that's not gonna do good for everything else. But I did put the physical body in the middle just because, like, let's say you're a high schooler and you're trying to go to college. Well, there's a lot of people who will take somebody with a physical body that doesn't know the technical skills just yet and try to teach them the technical skills. There's not too many people out there that'll take someone who's very technically sound but doesn't have the physical body to, keep up. And if you want to throw an outlier like Jokic in there, Jokic has a physical body. That dude is like 7'2", right? He is not, yeah, he's very technically sound, definitely has the tactical portion down, but he has a physical body. He's 7'2", all right? So then again, we're going to focus more on the physical preparation portion of this for today. And so that's where we're going to move on into my skyscraper. Here is how I like to develop the body. All right. So if we look at 5D or five-dimensional training, here are my 5 dimensions of that. And I can also relate this in a lot of different ways, but for today, we're going to stick to this one. All right. So if we look at the foundation of function, then we see that it starts with stability and capacity. So whenever it comes to stability, we can look at it from various ways. We can look at it from a nervous system stability standpoint or a parasympathetic, sympathetic type of standpoint, where we're trying to find flow pretty as much as we possibly can, right? Or we can look at it from the standpoint of like joint stability, right? If we look at the various joints, stability is what's going to create it to have the amount of mobility that it has, as well as being able to be a transformation zone to transfer energy through. Okay, so if the joints aren't stable, then we're not going to be able to, recruit the maximum amount of motor unit recruitment or just the maximum amount of muscle that we can to allow for whatever task that we're trying to do. After we create stability in various ways, then we want to move on into capacity or building the endurance of that stability. Now, again, this isn't a pyramid. I turned it into a skyscraper because it's more all intertwined, right? If we look at concurrent models or horizontal or vertical integration, we see that it's not so much about taking any individual component out. It's more about just switching the focus of that component as we go forward. And so, as we're doing capacity, we're still getting stability, but we're more focused on the endurance of these different, tasks that we're trying to perform. Same thing with maximal outputs. So as we climb this ladder, if as we get better stability, that's going to increase your maximal output. As we build better endurance towards that, we're going to build your maximal outputs, whether that's sprinting, agility, strength, right? All these different things. It's just, again, more about where are we focusing a lot more of our attention. Whenever we get to maximal outputs, we're going to focus heavily on what really matters, right? And so that is more of what's happening on the field, court, whatever you want to call it, right? Depending on what sport you are. The maximal output is going to allow you to, express and really hone in on, where do your strength levels need to be. Relative strength is something that is, crucial for everybody. Now, I do agree with a lot of people that say that absolute strength and absolute speed, things like that, are different for different people. I like to call that your athletic prowess, right? So if you already have a high maximal output, then yeah, your recoverability is going to be a little bit different than someone who doesn't. If you're more type 2, then your recoverability is going to be a little bit different than someone who is more type 1 muscle fibers. Whenever it comes to those maximal outputs, we got to take all these different things into account so that way we can really build you in a way that's going to be beneficial for what you need going forward. If you already run, 23 miles per hour on a football field, then, well, you're already fast enough, right? We need to start thinking about your maximal output whenever it comes to your agility, right? If you're already somebody who, runs at 23 miles per hour, but you don't have body armor on your body, well, then we need to build up that output, right? As well as, your agility, things of that nature. Okay. As we do these various things, as we climb up the skyscraper, then the focal point will start to switch to where we're thinking about more coordination. We know that, whenever it comes to max velocity during the swing phase, that hamstring, depending on how tight it is, if it doesn't relax completely, that's going to be an internal force that's going to take away from propelling us forward or projecting us forward, right? It's also going to increase the likelihood of a hamstring pull. We know that on the swing phase that's the time whenever most hamstring pulls occur, right? So you want to be able to slack off, you just don't want to slack off that much. This is where coordination really starts to get dialed in because we can change the intent on various movements that's going to allow for the coordination to be better in a way that we want. Then at the top of the skyscraper is design, right? Now, I know that I put form at the top, but that doesn't mean that technique isn't important as we go throughout this skyscraper, right? It's more of everybody always tries to fit people into a specific box whenever it comes to technique, but at this point, we don't know what perfect movement is. And so, as you're climbing this skyscraper, you're going to figure out what is the best technique for your individual body, right? Everyone has, different limb lengths. Everybody has different origins and insertions. Everyone has a different Q angle of the femur going into that hip socket. That all of these different things are going to play into what your best form is, right? If we look at sprint technique, we can look at, someone like James Wild who has his quadrant system where we have somebody who has, a fast ground contact time and then a long stride length, right? We have someone that has a short ground contact time and then a long stride length. If we look at someone who has a fast ground contact time and a short stride length, and then the last one is the short ground contact time, short stride length, right? These different things are going to play into what your best form is. All right. I understand that in research, we see that, what is that? That thigh separation of about 110 degrees is optimal. Well, that's not optimal for everybody, right? That's why I'm kind of out on this whole optimal debate in a lot of ways, is because it's not so much, there's a specific optimal way to go about doing something. It's going to be more optimal to you. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is by not cookie cuttering and individualizing. We'll go a lot further into depth about my assessment process going forward. We're just not going to go too far into detail with this one. This is more of a 50,000-foot view over my entire physical preparation philosophy. Okay. After we get done with the coordination and whatnot, then that's whenever design is going to start to come into play. Because again, we got to create your own box, right? And as that design starts to come about, then we can really start to dial in very minute details about what we're trying to do and accomplish. Okay. From there, then we can go into, or sorry, not from there. That's kind of, yeah, really broad overview of all of that. This is where we actually start, right? So we start by stating the goal. What is the goal that we are going for here? Whatever that is. We want to state that goal and then we want to reverse engineer from there. Now, understand that classic periodization isn't really doing everything that we want it to do at this point in time, right? We're having to be very agile in a lot of approaches. And so I I get that. But that doesn't mean that we can't put a plan in place because even though plans change and we need a plan in pencil so that way we can contribute what Charlie Weingroff would call lateralizations in any which way that we need to, we still want to have a plan in place. If we fail to plan, we plan to fail. And by just, this is whenever the art of coaching really comes into play and going off script in any point in time. So whenever we're stating the goal, these are the three main goals that I tend to have, right? Is increase the sport skills, whatever's necessary to increase those sport skills. Again, if we go back to that four coactive model, we can look at the physical body, psychological, technical, tactical. How are we going to be able to increase those sport skills? Let's look at this from a physical standpoint because this is the physical preparation philosophy of mine. Next, we go into repeatability. So whenever we have our sports skills, how can we repeat that sports skills to the best of our ability? Then we always want to think about reducing injuries, right? Going back to the foundation of health, obviously, rule number one is do no harm. Now, the risk versus reward thing that you'll hear a lot of people talk about, I'm definitely on board for that. It depends on what level you're at. As you climb ranks, again, if you already have everything necessary to succeed, well, then I mean the risk versus reward really isn't there. We're going to try to lower risk as much as possible because we don't need to cause any harm. Health is the foundation. It's the most important thing. And so as we do that, we want to think about that risk versus reward. If you have somebody who, is in 11th grade, is having a very hard time getting, the physical abilities or anything like that, well, and they're really wanting to get to where they want to go, I mean, who am I to hold that person back? You know what I'm saying? Who am I to try to, not provide resources in the best way possible? Now, obviously, there's a genetic component to everything, but we're learning quite a bit. That's why everybody's getting faster. That's why everyone's jumping higher, right? We've learned quite a bit, and so I'm not trying to get anyone's hopes up or anything like that. But at the same time, we have a little bit more control over some of these variables than what some people think. And at a certain point, we got to control what we can control. And who am I again to be a roadblock to somebody else? Now, I'm not saying that it's going to work out in the best way possible or anything like that. I just know that if I can get someone faster and they're willing to take risks towards that, well, I mean, let's do it, right? Like I'm not going to hold you back, right? Just because I'm glued to a specific philosophy or something like that. So let's start with the speed of movement. Yuri Verkhoshansky, he is a genius. He wrote a book called Super Training, and he wrote in there that it's all about speed of movement. Now, whenever I first read that, I was kind of like, huh, that really doesn't make too much sense. But as I started to dive into that, it makes a lot of sense, right? If we look at powerlifters, whenever they're doing a max effort lift, and they're just completely, absolutely maxing out, well, what's their intent during that? They may have the intent of going slow on the way down, but then as they're coming out of the hole, let's say it's a squat, right? They're trying to lift that bar as fast as they possibly can. They're trying to increase that speed of movement. If we look at, max velocity and sprinting, same thing. If we look at a pitcher throwing a throw, same thing, right? Now, obviously, with a pitcher, you want to think about the technical and tactical components of that as well, because you want to throw dots, right? You have to be accurate, so you can't just throw these wild pitches all the time. But at the same time, we want speed of movement in those pitches. Same thing with a quarterback, right? Same thing whenever we're providing agility, all the above. And so whenever it comes to that speed of movement, I broke it down to essentially three main components, right? You have your inputs, you have your outputs, and then you have your metabolic cost. We talked about it we touched upon it briefly before. The metabolic cost is in there because it's not so much about how much stress you can put yourself through, it's also what you can recover from. Even though you'll be able to, have a high amount of output, how quick are you able to, recover from that stuff? Someone who has a high athletic prowess, then, someone, yeah, like Usain Bolt, where he's running over 27 miles per hour, well, his metabolic cost is going to be a lot higher than somebody who only runs 20 miles per hour, right? That damage to the body in various ways is going to be much higher. It's taxing. So we got to take that into account as we think about all this stuff and how we're going to reverse engineer and make a plan to get you to where we're trying to get you to. I'm going to touch upon some brief stuff right here. So if we look at some basic motor learning progressions, I'm going to dive more into this later on. But as for right now, here's just some basic overview of some principles whenever it comes to that. All right. Now, I really do love what Dr. Rob Gray is doing and what, his thoughts towards motor learning and whatnot, especially with the baseball population that he's doing that on. Um, I definitely believe that in a lot of situations that we can start off with the skill and then see what's happening with that. And because if they can just do the skill right off the bat, then why even worry about progressing them in various ways? Right? And I mean, we can go in and cut all that out, and we can get more time with the skill, and that's gonna lead to better long-term adaptation because the more time we have with it, the better it's gonna be. Outside of that, though, there's a lot of reasons why we should isolate various things and then go to an integrated approach. Whenever it comes to, all types of exercises and whatnot, well, we want to think about a proximal to distal approach, right? We want to think more of a simple to complex. We want to think of closed chain, progress more to open chain type stuff. And then we want to think about movements being slower and then progress to being faster. All right, I'll be able to dive a lot more into all of this going forward, but for right now, this is an overview of that. Now, drills, the drill progression and regressions are developed at each stage according to the athlete's degree of mastery, right? So I'm not gonna hold again an athlete back whenever they're progressing faster than other people are. Okay, you got to meet an athlete where they're at and go ahead and do everything that's necessary in that moment. If you have to go off script, you have to go off script, right? Now, some basic anatomical positions that to progress through are obviously supine, or you're going to lay down on your back, prone, where you lay down on your stomach, seated, half kneeling, tall kneeling, a bilateral or a wide stance, a staggered stance, or what some people would call a B stance, split squat, lunge, single leg, right? As we progress through that, we're going to get a lot of great adaptation. As you saw previously, it starts with the function, right? So what do I mean by the function? Well, I mean the inputs into the body or just the internal body essentially. Okay? So whenever it comes to that, we got four main components that I'm thinking about. We have the kinetic chain, how the athlete's transferring energies, stabilizing, things of that nature. We have movement efficiency. We have intent towards any movement that we're trying to do, and then we have problem solving. Obviously, we're constantly thrown problems throughout any skill or sport as a whole, right? And so, what type of solutions are we doing to overcome those problems? Let's start with the kinetic chain. All right. So if we look at the kinetic chain, we see that I'd like to start with more of a proximal approach, right? So where is proximal? Well, proximal, according to Thomas Meyer, is the umbilicus, which is in the center of the core, right behind our belly button. Okay. So if we look at that, we can see right here in the middle, right behind the belly button, but in front of the spine, it's like directly in the middle of the body. Okay. What attachment sites are in that area? Well, we have the diaphragm and then we have the psoas or the hip flexors, right? So this is the deepest portion of this. As we go ahead and we get this stabilized, functioning properly, things like that, it's going to have a lot of downstream and upstream effects in whenever it comes to the rest of the body. All right. After we get those two things dialed in, if they need to be dialed in, if they're already dialed in, then we're skipping right over this, right? Then we want to think about the zone of apposition. So this is a PRI concept, and I actually really do like it. Again, I don't like those words optimal, but at the same time, we do know that certain positions are going to be a little bit better than others. Okay. Now, I don't batch according to ISA, but I do like to go ahead and do the ISA test, right? Because that's also going to play into what is more quote unquote optimal. Okay. And as you can tell with this red line right here, right, as we're going up and around through the spine, then you want it to come back and curve. We don't want the ribs to flare up in a lot of situations. I know that with a wide ISA, right, their ribs tend to be that way more by nature, but we want to be able to pull those down and keep a steady core, right? Now, as we keep that steady core, it also has to do with what's going on with the obliques, the transverse abdominis, blah, blah, blah. We're going to dive more into that later on. But for right now, we want to keep the zone of apposition in the back of our mind again, because as you know, what Cal Dietz and Chris Korfist would say in RPR, you want the body to explode outwards, not implode inwards. Okay. And where is it going to explode and implode from? It's going to explode and implode from that umbilicus area. Then we're going to move on into more of the myofascial lines or the fascial slings, whichever you want to call it, right? The superficial lines, the functional lines, the spiral lines, the lateral lines. These are what's going to help transfer energy through the body. By us going ahead and getting transferred through the body, that's going to increase the maximal outputs. That's going to get you better at sprinting. It's going to have a lot of effects that are going to be positive towards whatever task you come across in sport. All right. As I mentioned previously, by taking more of an isolated approach and then integrated. If you already have your fascial slings integrated in a way that are going to be good for you, then I'm not going to worry too much about isolating. But if you don't, and we need to increase the slings in various ways, then I want to think more about isolating. And I'm going to go into detail about how to assess for some of that stuff. Another thing is we want to maximize efficiency. So if you notice, I put coordination in there. That's because even though it's not going to be like a main focal point, right? Because the coordination of various sporting movements starts to change as you get more elite. We'd still want to have good coordination, right? So what I mean by that, well, good motor patterning, right? So your co-contractions, the fascial slings that we just talked about, the kinetic chain, right? What are your compensatory strategies? I'm not again all into perfect strategies and things like that. But there are compensatory strategies that do end up, changing some stuff, right? And so if we want to think about it from that perspective, yes, you can still be a very good athlete with, different compensations. I'm not saying that. It's just if we have an opportunity to where we can overcome some of these things and it is going to make you a better athlete, then we're going to do it. Okay. If you're somebody who already jumps 40 inches and you have compensation strategies, do you. As long as it's not going to increase the risk of injury, we're good to go. Okay. Then another one is, are you more fascial driven or muscle driven? You can look at this as more forceful or elastic, right? What type of superpower do you got whenever it comes to that? Now, again, I don't batch with ISA whenever it comes to that, but you still want to be able to understand if the body is more elastic or if it's more forceful. Okay. After that, then we got the muscle tendon unit, right? We have the synchronization with between it as well as the health. Tendons are very important, right? We want to maximize everything that has to do with the tendons as best as possible. That synchronization between the tendon and the muscle matters. The health between both matter. All right. Then we want to maximize the stretch reflex. The stretch reflex is essentially the first portion of the stretch shortening cycle. Without the stretch reflex, that shortening cycle doesn't really activate, and that is going to hinder sporting movements. From there, another input is intent, right? We know that how you do something matters as much as what you do. You can peep all types of research if you want to. The intent towards movement matters, right? The intent towards what you're going for matters. Okay. Again, whenever we look at a power lifter, we know that through research and whatnot, that if you have the intent of moving the bar as fast as possible, even though the bar isn't moving very fast, that's going to create a positive adaptation towards type 2 muscle fibers, right? We can see that it also creates positive adaptation towards the central nervous system. Uh, there's a lot of great things behind having intent, and the intent does drive a lot of variables that we're trying to increase whenever it comes to our sporting tasks. How can we drive intent? Well, so intent comes through various means. Okay, so first I'm going to start off with the 5 steps to buy-in, because this is something that I believe is very important towards having any intent towards what's going on in the weight room, on the field, all the above. So if we look at the 5 steps, we not everybody is going to start off at resistance, right? There are going to be some people that come to us that are already committed, right? They're already doing what's asked and going above and beyond and holding others to a high standard, right? How can we get those committed people to be compelled to bring others with them, right? If we have someone who's in a resistance stage, well, how can we get them to go from resistance to reluctant to compliant to committed, right? And climb the ladder or just go towards compelled. Now, one thing I will say is I added in something over here. I can't really see it too well, but if we look over here under resistance, we also have resentment, rejection, and repression, right? I forget exactly what the doctor's name is. I wrote it down there, but these four things are the four R's of usually what tends to occur whenever a relationship is going to end, whatever that relationship is, right? Whenever there is repression, you are at the final stage, right? That this is like the end of it. Pretty much that relationship is ending right then and there. Okay. So whenever it comes to getting somebody through these stages and get them to where they're compelled, then we have to start with the interpersonal portion, which is, it starts with why. Simon Sinek has a very good book out that I highly recommend to everybody, and it again, it's called "It Starts with Why." Here is a little graph that he has in that book that I like to show a lot of people. In again, because once we know somebody's why, then we can figure out what's driving them, right? Once we figure out what's driving them, then we can start to find various ways to get them to where we start to climb these ranks. Let's say we have someone compliant who does what's asked, no more nor less. Well, if we know what their why is and we know what's going to drive them, then we can start to figure out how we're going to go about getting them to committed and then compelled, right? Once we figure out how we're going to do that, then we need to start to figure out the what. If we want to translate this into what is his name? James Clear says, right? And we start to look at um, what is that? I forget exactly what the why translates to, but the how translates to strategies, right? And then the what is the tactics, right? So what are the specific details or the specific tactics that we're going to implement to start to get them to climb those ranks to where they become, more of a winning type of person, or they are a champion. Because essentially, we all want to be champions, right? And I knew from a very early age that I was going to be one, and that's something that has driven me ever since. Once you find out what your why is, what your purpose is, you're going to figure out a whole new level of motivation, because now it's not based off of extrinsic motivation, it's based off of intrinsic motivation. If you have a why that is very external based, well, then we need to figure out how to internalize that and get it to where it's intrinsic. Okay. And so that's how you're gonna build that, the different psychological aspects of the interpersonal relationship. Now, that's more based on the athlete, right? We need to figure out their why. We need to figure out how we're going to get them to, be promoted and get compelled to push towards that why and bring others with them. Okay. Well, now how we can do that is also by building trust, right? So this is one of the first things that we have to do as a coach, no matter who it is. We have to build trust with the athlete, right? everyone knows that saying, they don't know how much you, or they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's the first step, right? Is caring. How can we find out, or how can we show them that we care, right? Because that's the first thing. The next way to build trust is through your character, right? What type of person are you? What type of morals do you have? And what are you showing them throughout the process to show them that you have a good character and that you care, right? From there, then we got to think about competence, because you need to know what you're doing, right? As a coach, you got to know what you're doing. If you don't have any type of competence towards what you're doing, what are we really doing, right? And so we want to build that confidence, whatever that is. In my situation, I took years and years and years of going and learning from the world's best, so that way I could be as competent as I possibly could, right? They want to see that you're committed. They want to see that you care about their goals. And the way to do that is by showing them that you're committed towards providing resources to them in the best way possible. Okay? Commitment's a two-way street, right? It doesn't just go one way or the other. You want to show them, again, that you're committed. And a great way to show them that you're committed is through consistency, right? Consistently being there day in and day out, grinding with them, right? They see that. They understand it, right? They want to be a part of something that is going to, push them towards their why and get them towards their goals. Okay? And so by providing consistency that shows commitment, by showing commitment in various ways, that's going to allow you to provide competency towards getting them towards their goal. You want to show them you care, and you can do that by doing these various aspects. Okay? Now, we're going to stop here for today. And so, next presentation, we're going to go more towards the outputs of all of this stuff. All right.